could just give us an introduction to the work that you do.
Yep.
I think for most of us, we've heard about a little bit about what you do, but only in passing. So I think for most of us, it will be pretty much a real introduction. But in any case, I'm David Durfee. I'm chair of this committee. I represent Shaftesbury and Glastonbury and Sunderland down in Bennington County. And we'll go around the room and tell you where we're all from.
Rodney Graham, represent Orange 3. I'm Williamstown and Chelsea.
Jed Lipsky, represent Lamoille 1, Stowe.
Henry Pearl, I represent the towns of Danville, Peacham, and Cabot.
And I'm David Templeman. I represent Barton, Brownington, and Westmore.
Mike Rice, represent the Bennington Rutland District, Danby, Dorset, Landgrove, Mount Tabor, and Peru.
I, John O'Brien, represent Royalton and my hometown of Tunbridge.
Esme Cole, Windsor 6, Hartford. Heather Supernat, Vice Chair, Windsor 4, Barnard, Pomfret, and Bridgewater.
And that's it. We've got two committee members who are able to be with us this afternoon. And then we have our committee assistant, Laura Rich, who you've been working with. That's it for the folks who are in our room. So if you just want to, for the record, introduce yourself again, and we'll be very happy to hear what you're up to.
Sure. I did have my dog in here with me, so I guess he could introduce himself, but he left, fortunately, for all of us. So hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. I'm Laurie Bayranavand. I'm the director of the Center for Agriculture and Food Systems at Vermont Law and Graduate School, and also a professor at the law school. So it's nice to hear where all of you are from. I feel like I've lived in a bunch of those areas. I live in Woodstock now. Obviously, the law school is in South Royalton. I worked at Legal Aid in Vermont, in Rutland, so it's nice to see all of that representation. So the Center for Agriculture and Food Systems is a little complicated to describe because it's a couple of different things. There's an academic program associated with it. So we have a master's in food and agricultural law and policy, and then we also have an LLM degree in food and agricultural law and policy for people who have already gotten their JD but want to concentrate in food and agricultural law. So we have a whole set of curriculum associated with those degrees that are focused on the food system. And our summer classes are really exciting, but kind of always changing depending on some of the work that we're doing, some of the people that we've connected with, and things that our students are interested in. So we have a farm workers in the law course that we're teaching this summer. We have one that's focused on Black land loss, and we also have one focused on heirs property, which are some new ones. But then we also have a 3-week course that's focused on cannabis law, which has been really popular and great for the students. It's funny because at the end of it, they feel like they're experts in cannabis law since so few people know anything about cannabis law. So that's the academic side of things. We also are a grant-funded center. So we have some government funding, and then we also have some foundation funding. So the funding that we have is pretty flexible, though. So our work spans the food system. The way that we try to do our work is to focus in on requests from people in the food system, so stakeholders in the food system who need some kind of law and policy assistance on a specific issue. And a lot of those issues then will go either into our food and agriculture clinic, which is an experiential offering for the students. They can enroll. They get some instruction about how to be an advocate. So master's students enroll and law students enroll. They get some training on professionalism, but then they also get to work alongside the project partners to develop a resource for them. So we've had students work on things focused on urban agriculture, prison food. They've done some stuff on food safety. They've actually done a bunch of stuff on food safety. Most recently, one of the things that we just finished up actually is an issue brief that we worked with rural Vermont on that was focused on farm slaughter and the personal use exemption. So we haven't released that yet. It's in the process of getting designed, but that's an example of something that started as a project in the clinic and now is getting finished up as a resource. So we try to be really focused on stakeholders within the food system and their needs, and then tie our students into that to help develop resources. I sent Alara some of the resources this morning. I don't know if any of you had a chance to take a look at them. They're some of our most recent resources that we put out. One of them is focused on managed rotational grazing and has some recommendations for the Farm Bill. One of them is a report that's focused on how to build equity into the Farm Bill. So either whether it's expanding on existing programs and opportunities, taking things that were created through ARPA, and then figuring out how to create mandatory funding for those in the Farm Bill, or just creating new things altogether. That was done in partnership with a consortium of law schools called the Farm Bill Law Enterprise. And actually, we just got back I brought 4 students down to DC to go to a summit to be able to talk to some people on the Hill about some of the recommendations in those reports, which was pretty exciting. They got to meet with some staffers in Peter Welch's office, and then also the actual Debbie Stabenow. So not just her staff, but she came out to meet with them. So they were a little bit starstruck. That was exciting for them. Some of the other resources that we have kind of like in the wings, one of them is a report about prison food in New England that we worked on with Farm to Institution New England. And that is sort of in the final stages of getting copy edited, and then we'll get designed eventually and will be released pretty soon. A lot of our work is national in focus, given the sources of our funding. We try to pull in like the on-farm slaughter issue brief, for example, talks about the Federal Meat Inspection Act and the language in the federal statute, but we use Vermont as a case study so that we could tie in the experience of rural Vermont and what people at rural Vermont had been hearing from farmers across Vermont. We tried to weave in a couple other states too, but it really is pretty Vermont heavy. So I would say there's a bunch of national resources, but we also have some that try to focus in on Vermont and the New England region specifically. The issue areas that we work on kind of run the gamut depending on what we hear from stakeholders in the food system. We've been doing a lot of work on farmland access. That's been a big issue area for us. Agrarian commons, the issue of like holding land in common, that's been a big issue area for us. We have something called the Healthy Food Policy Project that really focuses on municipal level laws that can increase access to healthy food. That's been a really great project that has an amazing advisory board from all over the country that has helped to advise on some of the resources for that project. And then we've done a bunch of stuff over the past year and a half, I would say, focused on farm workers because of a partnership that we developed with Farm Worker Justice. So that's been, we have some upcoming work with them too, to do an additional like follow-up report to one that we did on enforcement in the pesticide context last summer. So I think I'll take a breath and see if you all have any questions, if there's anything I could dive into more.
I'll ask, oh, okay, no.
No, please.
No, Representative Supernaut.
Hi, thank you so much. I was just curious to know a little bit more about the report that is focused on pushing equity in the Farm Bill and where I could find that.
Oh yeah. Hang on. I can pop the link into the chat for you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. What's interesting about that report in particular, we've been doing one of the projects that we have that's been ongoing has been focused on, this is saying that it's only going to allow.
Yeah, I don't think it will allow you to actually Zoom chat me. It's a
Okay.
system setting. So if you want to email it to me, I'll circulate it to the whole
Oh,
committee.
sure. Okay. One of the things that has been really interesting for us, we've been, Farm Aid reached out to us and Rural Advancement Foundation International, RAFI US, reached out to us to do some work on the National Appeals Division process, where farmers who apply for Farm Service Agency loans who get denied then go through the appeals process with the National Appeals Division. And we heard a couple of different things about that. One was that the process felt really difficult to navigate as a pro se person without an attorney, especially when you're going up against the agency. And then the other thing that we heard about was people felt like there's a lot of discrimination happening in that process. So we had a great intern last summer who actually also worked at Farm Aid, who did a bunch of FOIA requests and got a bunch of information from the USDA that actually documented the fact that Black applicants were being denied at a really alarming rate compared to any of the other categories. So the head of FSA asked to have a call with us, which is great, and is really excited about thinking about how to revise their internal policies and handbooks and to try to make that process feel more equitable. So some of the recommendations in this report are focused on farm service loans and how to be able to access those more equitably. But we're also doing some work on that with the agency, which has been really positive so far. I think we just have to maybe be a little bit quick with trying to get it done.
Thank you.
Representative Lipsky?
Well, thank you, Lori.
Yeah.
I was really trying to advocate for Vice Chairman Supernaut, who, what tweaked my ears when you talked about farmland access, and Representative Supernaut had asked the previous the soil specialists about programs that might exist and what growing fresh food in Vermont, where we have pockets of exceptional soil, but we have a great need in our rural state to be productive. Are there any programs that advocate for small entrepreneurs to gain access with some long-term security, and then possibly leading to equity in that property? And I'll just caveat, I have served on land trust boards, and we can serve not just open space land, but we've done a lot with agricultural land conservation. Some projects where we wanted to set 10 acres worth where there could be some cooperative farming done on those high quality soils. But it's really looking to the future generation of younger entrepreneurs that don't come from a lineage of farmland owners that they may inherit or be able to acquire land. If there's anything in the Vermont Law School or in your curriculum that might advise or turn us in the direction to make progress in that area. Thank you. Sorry to be so wordy.
No, I appreciate it. I felt like I was very wordy for many minutes. I would say most of the initiatives that I've seen in that space have been through private philanthropy dollars and not necessarily through any sort of like USDA grants per se. When I was talking about the Farm Service Agency loans, a lot of people try to use those to be able to make land purchases or to be able to buy land. What's really difficult about that is the way that they analyze those. If you're a new entry farmer and you don't have a lot of capital and you can't put together a great business plan, you're kind of out of luck, which is part of why we've been trying to work with FSA to figure out how to make that process feel a little bit more equitable for new entry farmers, especially since if the age of farmers we know is going up and most of them are aging out of farming. And so we need to figure out how to be able to support the new entry farmers that, like you said, they're not necessarily taking over a farm that's been in their family for many generations and they want to have access to new land. Fran Miller, who I work with, she works a lot on the farmland access issues and tries to think about creative ways to be able to provide access to land. She actually started privately, like outside the center, the White River Land Collaborative, which the Vermont Land Trust has been involved in, and is kind of a great model for one of those sort of like commons ownership type of things. We also, one thing that I didn't mention, but would be great for you to know, for all of you to know for your constituents, is that we also run the Vermont Legal Food Hub out of the law school. So that provides pro bono legal services to people who are trying to, I'd say probably that most of the cases that have come in through the Legal Food Hub have been business entity formation, but some of them are real estate transactions. Some of them are labor law related. We don't do litigation. So like if somebody was, in trouble with the Agency of Ag, we're not going to take that case on and help litigate against the Agency of Ag, but we will provide transactional support. And we have a network of attorneys around the state that participate in that, which is really nice and devote time to take those cases. And we also keep some of those cases in-house with our students to work on in the clinic. So that's a great resource for all of you to know about for your constituents if they're ever thinking like, I would love some help drafting a lease, or I would love some help drafting a contract, or thinking about how to start a food business, that the Legal Food Hub is a great resource for them to be able to access. And the income limits are set. It's a little different than legal aid. You don't have to be quite at the same levels, and it's more focused on business income in a lot of ways. So the accessibility, I'd say, is pretty high for people.
Good to know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Representative Rice?
Thanks. Yeah, I was just scrolling through some of the reports and noticed one on food systems resilience from a few years ago. And our committee was newly tasked this year with food resiliency in our name and purview.
Yep.
And so just wondering if you have any sort of like high level thoughts or resources or anything to sort of, we've been talking in recent days about how we define food resiliency and sort of what are the things we should be talking about in the committee to make sure we're handling that part of our assignment. So any thoughts you have on that?
Yeah. So if you take a look at that report, that's based on the sort of factors or the pillars that's based on come from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. We started a project that was a follow-up project to that with a bunch of different groups in New England. And we got pretty far along, and then the Center for a Livable Future released a resource, I think maybe a month ago, on food systems resilience and like a framework to assess food systems resilience that is really great, actually. So I would highly recommend that to you all to take a look at. We then reached out to the Center for a Livable Future to see if there was some additional follow-up that we could work. We've worked with them before, so we tried to see if there was some additional work that we could do to help supplant some of that work also, but we don't want to duplicate it. But I would say that resource that just came out is actually really great and is a really great tool.
That's the Food System Resilience Planning Guide for Local Governments. Is that? That's just the first thing I found on their website about it, but I can keep looking.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's what it is. I will find it and I'll make sure to send it to Alara so that you all can have it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Representative O'Brien.
Lori, I just wondered if there are conversations with the faculty and your students about sort of what we do. I mean, you produce reports that become resources. You help on the legal front, a lot of people in agricultural and food systems. But do you ever have ideas for bills? Because here we are, you know, citizen legislators. We don't have staffs. We're not as deeply, you know, in the sort of research mode about certain conversations. So whether there's that partnership ever with maybe rural Vermont or NOFA, but even individual legislators or committees like ours.
Yeah, we haven't done that in the past. Typically, we sort of like wait for people to reach out to us to tell us that they could use some help on something. And that's historically how we've done our work, is kind of like through an intake process. But if there are things that you all feel you could use some help with, drafting wise, or if there are bills that you all are interested in, I am sure that our students would be thrilled to work on some of those things. Definitely. We have a little bit of, we have to just make sure that we bill it to our funding that allows us to be able to do those kinds of things. Our USDA funding does not let us do that type of work.
I had been thinking of a similar question with just whether historically you or other people associated with the center have testified on legislation that's come through this committee.
We have not in our center. I used to testify when I worked at Legal Aid, but I have not done that since I've been working at the law school. I know that the director of our Environmental Law Center, Jenny Rushlow, has testified on some climate legislation, but we have not testified on any legislation.
Well, you have a standing invitation if you see.
Thank you.
If you happen to notice anything on our agenda that seems like it would benefit from your perspective, we'd always be happy to hear from you. Just know that.
Oh, thank you.
And
thank you so much.
Thank you for sending the resources. I think Laura had said that the first email that you mentioned a little bit earlier, she hadn't gotten. So I don't think we saw the material that you sent along this morning. So okay. She'll follow up, I'm sure.
Okay.
And then
I'll
just
make sure to resend that too.
We'll circulate whatever we get.
Yeah, I'll resend that to make sure that you all get it. I downloaded some of our recent reports and attached them. I wonder if maybe that made it too big of a file to go through. And then I included just a link to our site where we have all our resources. And then some of our resources are their own website. So like we have the Farmland Access Legal Toolkit is a whole website that has a bunch of different resources. We have a farmers market one that's very similar to that. And then the Healthy Food Policy Project is like a whole database of local laws and policies. And then a bunch of different guides, like how to effectively engage citizens in writing laws and policies and a bunch of things like that. So I'll resend it, and maybe I might change those to links so that it won't get held up with big chunky PDFs.
Good. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming in this afternoon.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Yep. Goodbye.
Bye now. So that wraps it up for today, unless there's follow-up questions or comments. So we've got next week a pretty full week already mapped out, and thinking that it's too bad we don't have more time to do this or to do that, because we've got now several bills that we wanted, I think, all take a look at before we head out for town meeting break in 3 weeks. So we'll be moving through things at a fairly brisk pace. We also want to try and wrap up the universal school meals bill, and we've got still testimony to take from a little more follow-up testimony on not the school meals bill specifically, but the local purchasing incentive, which we may want to try to incorporate into that bill. And we want to take a look at the existing language that set up the local purchasing incentive. So we're going to do that on Tuesday afternoon. We'll have legislative council come in. And then by the end of, we have the Agency of Education too, also possibly on Tuesday. But in any case, once we've heard from those three different folks, then I think we will have sort of covered, I think, pretty well the sort of range of people who we want to hear from. And it'll be a question of, okay, how do we want to proceed and start marking up that bill and then move it out hopefully. And then as time allows, I don't know that we're going to actually put it in the agenda, but when we have an opportunity next week, we'll hear from the sponsors of H205, who are sitting to my left and right, and hear what that bill is all about. And then possibly, as time allows again next week, maybe some of the other bills too. Yeah, Mike.
Just wanted to draw everyone's attention for your weekend reading lists to the, one of the reports on the CAF's site is the State Farm to School Policy Handbook, which includes trends in state legislation around farm to school, case studies.
Okay.
Around Vermont or around?
No, around the country, what states have done or are doing.
Okay, great. Another resource.
There goes my weekend.
Yeah.
Why don't you read it?
I just want to.
I will read it and report back, Rodney. I just wanted to make sure you had,
He's gonna publish the field notes for us.
Schedule Mike in for testimony.
I just want to thank you we've had a lot of riveting testimony today, and I don't know where you dig these people. There's some smart. I mean, it's
From the universities.
Yeah.
It's very valuable.
Yeah, right.
For me, it's,
Between the university, law school.
I mean, where would you have
Yeah,
thought of the
right.
law school?
Right, yeah.
How did you happen to?
Somebody made a reference.
I think I told you, or asked if CAF's was on the
Yeah,
sort of
so-
list.
Well, no,
Credit
it's
goes
just,
to-
it's really good.
I forgot to ask yesterday too. I think that somebody mentioned it, but whether anybody who had been able to go across the street in the morning to the forestry gathering had anything to share, any important.
I think it was just Josie and I.
was there.
Oh, you were there too? Sorry. Then I'll let you speak on it.
Oh, no, I said yesterday, I didn't really think there was a whole lot to report back that we hadn't already heard.
I think it was the same presentation.
Danny gave essentially the same presentation.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And then there was a
Breakfast.
couple people from, a couple of the UVM forestry folks, a professor and a graduate, postgraduate, associate.
Okay.
Spoke briefly, but,
Was it about the roadmap? What was the?
She talked about the.
Danny talked about the roadmap, yeah. And then the UVM folks just kind of talked more generally about the state of foresters and forestry in Vermont. It was forester focused, I would say. A lot of the people in the room who weren't legislators were foresters.
Yeah.
So,
They were all foresters, I mean,
Henry.
I have a procedural question that I should absolutely know, but I don't. Or well, I think maybe I do, but I want verification.
Yeah.
Any bill that's introduced before the deadline is for the biennium.
Yes.
And so if we don't get anything to cross over, we can take it up next year, correct?
Yep, absolutely.
And there's also the opportunity to introduce new legislation for next year.
Yes.
At the end of, when does that start?
Well, I'm not sure when it starts technically. It may be, so I don't want to, I'd be speculating if I answered that question, but yes, it's certainly next year, when we're back here, there will be another opportunity to be, yes.
Just wanted to make sure I had that right in my head.
And it'll be an intact group. There's no change, significant.
Right, committees don't, yeah, they're,
Unless you make the speaker.
That happened.
No, and if you were there for the training, you can get expunged or expelled from a committee or the body.
today, at the training, yeah, if you are
I got a.
violate certain.
Yeah, certain,
But, yeah, no, typically,
Out?
1 hour, do something outrageous.
No, I won't, I
I think we
promise.
saw this week, so we had a member of the House resigned a couple weeks ago.
Oh, yeah,
Left a
Kate Donnelly.
vacant seat, yeah. And I think we saw somebody move from one committee to take
Oh,
that
really?
committee seat, yeah. And
Committee was-
there was a need, a perceived.
Is there an appointed person in that seat now?
No, the governor has to appoint somebody, it hasn't happened.
And then, even if we don't get something across by the deadline,
It can,
still do it.
as a committee bill, right? There's all these little workarounds,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Or tack it on to the,
Yeah, if
Keep it built.
it's germane.
Was it our first year when
So are we
your
adjourned
predecessor
offline or whatever?
No, we're still in session here.